Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. This is the No Gluten Zone. My name is Diane. I thank you so much for joining me today. Today I am going to take you with me into my kitchen and we're gonna make my favorite gluten-free flour blend. I know you can buy blends out there, but this is my favorite by far. I have the best results. A lot of the stuff I make, honestly, people tell me they don't know it's gluten-free until they find out later. So honestly, if you want to make really good homemade gluten-free stuff, this is a must-have. You must have this recipe. You must make this blend. I got this from Annalise G. Roberts. I have 3 or 4 cookbooks of hers. Her stuff is phenomenal, and this is her blend that she has in the book. I know at one time you could buy it already made. I never did, and I don't know if they still sell it like that. They might. I do love and use Authentic Foods flours and starches and those things wherever they have it, if they have it available. This blend I call it an all-purpose blend, but I also sometimes refer to it as a pastry blend. I make cakes and cookies and pie crust and all those kind of things out of this blend, but not loaves of bread. For that, you need a little more protein in there, and there are other blends for that, and I will do that at some point in the future with my personal favorites. So for the brown rice flour, it is Authentic Foods sells in extra fine brown rice flour, and that is crucial to this recipe. The other is potato starch and tapioca starch, and those you can use any brand you want. I like Authentic Foods, and I do use those for everything that they offer. If they offer it, I buy it from them for everything that I use because they are such a great brand, and I like to support companies that I love. So yes, I could get those items from another company, but because I love them, I want to support them and I get it from them. That's up to you. But the brown rice flour you do have to get from Authentic Foods to make it the right consistency. I think it being extra fine really makes a difference in the final outcome of what you're making. So with that, let's get in the kitchen and get it done. So the first thing I do is kind of loosen up the flour in the bag, because sometimes it's really compacted, and then if you try to pour it out, it comes out in big chunks and it really makes a mess. So I loosen it up, and now I'm going to measure out. I make a really big batch of this. You can see the husky peeking in the corner there, seeing if there's anything yummy in the kitchen. Because I bake so frequently, I know I've mentioned before on Instagram that there's always cupcakes in my house because my husband loves cupcakes and eats them every single day. So because I bake so frequently, there's always cupcakes, and a lot of times I'm making other stuff too. I just love to bake. So I make really big batches of this flour. So I will give you the proportions for a regular batch, and then I will give you my big proportions that I use. So I normally sift these when I'm making the mix because there's a lot of clumps in the bag. And then I do sift it again when I do the recipe. So I guess they're like double sifted, but I think that really helps. I have seen some recipes that say to sift your stuff like 4 or 5 times to get it like really, really fine. Gives it a much nicer texture or crumb to your finished product. So I do at least sift when I make the mix and sift before the recipe. Sometimes I will do a couple extra times if it's like for a really special occasion and not just everyday eating. So that's just a tip to remember. So the brown rice flour I typically do first. Now I'm going to move to there's potato starch and tapioca starch. And if you've never worked with these before, just be aware that the starches are very light and airy and starchy. Think kind of like cornstarch or baby powder, those kind of things. So they tend to fly and they can be really, really messy. I normally wear an apron when I do this. I forgot today. I was really in a hurry and I totally forgot because it usually does end up all over my clothes. The starches do. So just be aware of that. It'll probably be all over your counter and all over your clothes and the floor. it does get messy. I have learned over time how to minimize the mess somewhat, but they are still very light and airy and flighty and messy. As I shake that sifter, you can see some of the dust rising up, and that's what I'm talking about. It just goes like everywhere. The starches are just very, very messy. So now you mix all three of these together. It is the brown rice flour, the potato starch, and the tapioca starch. And you really want to mix it very thoroughly and evenly. I usually set a timer or a stopwatch, and the best tool in the world to do this is just a whisk. It really brings it together. So I just keep whisking. Like I said, I either set a timer or I have a stopwatch running, and I do this for at least a few minutes. I try to do it for up to 5 minutes. So now I'm going to empty out what I have in my container to rotate. I'm going to put the new flour on the bottom, and then I will put that back on top if it all fits. Sometimes I have a little extra that doesn't fit in there, and that's how I do it. I love this container I have for storing my flour. I got them at Smart and Final. I believe that's a 4-quart. I also have, they come in a pack of 3, and I also bought a pack of 2 quarts for some flour mixes that I don't use as often, and I don't need such a big batch. So I have these for the big batches, and I also use one of them because it came in a 3-pack. So I have one for this one for a bread flour, and the other one I store my almond flour because I buy the certified gluten-free almond flour at Costco, and it comes in a pretty big bag. And I find it's just so much easier to use and access in these containers than keeping it in its bag. So I really love these containers, and I highly recommend them. I like that the top is so wide open, so when I'm making a recipe, I can measure, I can hold the spoon and the measuring cup right over the top of the container, and if anything falls out, it just falls back in the container and it's not wasted. So that's one of the things I really, really like. So I thank you so much for joining me today. I hope this was helpful. I hope you love using this mix in your recipes. And I do really, really highly recommend getting Annalise G. Roberts cookbooks, at least some of them. I would say all of them, really, if you are a baker and you love baking and you need to bake gluten-free. Her recipes are just the best, hands down, that I've seen, and everything in her book. It's some books I have, like some of the recipes are good and some are not. Honestly, all of her recipes are just phenomenal. So I highly recommend. And if you do try this out, let me know how your stuff turned out and what your results were and if you liked it. I would really love to hear that. Again, thank you for joining me today. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and please consider subscribing to my channel. I try to post weekly, sometimes every other week, things that are somehow related to food issues in many different ways. They incorporate in there, I try to cover the different aspects of our lives that it affects and touches, whether you yourself are living it or someone you know or love is living it. I hope the information I share is helpful. That is my passion, because my first couple years going through this was really, really challenging, and I hope to help others and make that transition easier for them. So have a great day, guys.